It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all in the fifth session, virtual session of the webinar entitled Exploring Language and Literature in New Normal. And I'm very pleased to introduce our esteemed guest today, Dr. Queen Sarkar. Dr. Queen Sarkar is a multilingual poet and academician, a reviewer and translator based in Ranchi, Jharkhand, India. She is currently working as an assistant professor in the University Department of English in Ranchi University. She has also been empanelled as an academician, as an academic counselor in IGNOU. Sarkar has done her Ph.D. from IIT Kharagpur on contemporary Indian English poetry, a Poetics of Cosmopolitanism, contemporary English poetry, and Shared Global Poetic Imaginary. Her research areas include poetry, translation, cross-cultural communication, cultural studies, adaptation, and appropriation. Her reviews, articles, poems, and research papers have been published in reputed international journals and anthologies, including Inner Child Press, USA, MuseIndia, Kistrech Theatre International, Atunis Galaxy Poetry, Amaravati Poetic Prism, Poetcrit, Setu, Bilingual Journal published from Pittsburgh, USA. Her poems have also been translated into Spanish, Arabic, and Gujarati. She is also a member of the prize nomination committee of the Ekphrastic review. Sarkar has been invited to moderate a session on KFLC, the Languages, Literatures, and Cultural Conference, University of Kentucky, Lexington, USA. Sarkar has been appointed as the Ambassador of Goodwill Seeds of Youth 21st Century, India by United Nations of Letters. She is also the Ambassador of Peace for Switzerland, France. Sarkar is also a bona fide member of World Nations Writers Union, Kazakhstan. So this is our guest today. So we are very privileged to have you, Dr. Sarkar. And without wasting any further time, I'd like to invite you to start the session. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for this kind and generous introduction. And I'm really grateful. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the Department of English Language and Literature, University of Creative Technology, Chittagong, for organizing this very interesting and thoughtful webinar and for making me a part of it. And especially, when COVID-19 promises to alter us in all the strange ways, I think this webinar is like a paradigm shifting events that divides lives and cultures into before and after. And as you said, the new normal, I think this unpredictability has actually become the new normal these days. So to begin with, I believe that, in this time, the humanities and the history and literature in particular offer important insights into how people have dealt with trauma of pandemics in the past and how to make sense of world now in many ways, which is beyond our control. So, if history illustrates the effect of pandemics on the whole communities, then literature, I think, gives us a more intimate view. And I think that's the new normal has made it very clear amidst this lockdown and the crisis. And I believe probably this is one of the reasons that I have decided to focus on the concept of self-realization with reference to the magnificent works of Henrik Ibsen. So, to begin with, as we all know, that the interpretations and criticism of Henrik Ibsen's social dramas have reached monumental proportions since the Norwegian master's first great plays began to achieve world recognition. But very little headway has really been made in correlating the enigmatic message of his dramas with his own philosophy of life and his solutions to the problems which confronted him. Now, men of letters, poets, philosophers, scholars have written exhaustively of the probable interpretation of his plays, have spoken authoritatively and imaginatively of his social message, his individualism, his artistic purpose. But for most part, they have neglected to crystallize the essence of Ibsen's dramatic expressions, either in the light of his own life or in relationship to the age in which he lived. So, in today's session, we first aim to explore these really touched expressions and try to understand how the cast of characters in his works are a testament to the inner conflicts of his life. In a way, we would also focus on the play of will and self realization in Ibsen's work. But before entering into that zone, it's very important for all of us to understand how this concept of self have been portrayed, twisted, reshaped, and redefined in literature over the course of time. So we will first begin with an overview of the self in literature. Then we will try to understand the concept of self-realization with Ibsen's point of view by giving special reference to his letters. And thirdly, we will focus on into how his own experience have created his characters. So, to begin with the overview of the self in literature over the genres and ages. See, in literature, there have been numerous prefigurings of selfhood. For example, Hamlet starts with his sense of self, both cradling and assaulting it. St. Augustine's Confession have been called the manifesto of the inner world. Jacob Bucard writes that, by the end of the 13th century, Italy was beginning to swarm with individuality. The ban upon personality was dissolved. In the later part of the 18th century, through the Enlightenment and Romanticism, a deep change begins in mankind's sense of its situation. Now, in the Enlightenment educated Europeans experience, an expansive sense of power over nature and themselves. This self actually attains the dignity of a noun as well, as if to register the enhancement of authority. The idea of self becomes a force within public life, almost, like taking into an institutional shape and certainly entering into an arena of historical contention. Now, for what occurs is not just a new perception or of our internal space, but it's an emergence as major social factor. Now, I remember once I was reading that, Hegel said that we celebrate our existence on its own account. That is being for being sake. And we have stepped into a new era like this. The self turns out to consist of many selves. And talking about the redefinition or reconfiguration of this self over the various genres of literature and throughout various ages, we find that this self may evoke an original state of nature not yet seen by history. The self does service as a heuristic category, enabling criticism of modes of existence taken to be normally crippling. The self may be envisaged graphically with higher and lower segments. At the same time, the self becomes a lens of scrutiny with which to investigate the psychological states and especially helpful for the study of anxiety, a condition that grows in acuteness as awareness of self increases. The self also implies an acceptance of the sufficiency of the human condition so that divinities, myths, and miracles slip into obsolescence. As against, atomistic theories posting the space outside of the society, the self may be seen as social formation as well, a corollary to of advanced civilization. I remember a character in Henry James' portrait of a lady remarks that there is no such thing as an isolated man or woman. What do you call oneself? Where does it begin? where does it end? I mean, it overflows into everything that belongs to us, and then it flows back again. So basically, this self entails a provisional unity of being, yet this occurs, if it does at all, during transformation and dissolution. But the focus is, what is this self-realization, whose importance Ibsen indicates when he says that it is the highest attainment possible to a human being. A few excerpts from the letter, I think, should make this very clear. In one of his letters to Laura Killer, he remarks that great thing is to become honest and truthful in dealing with oneself, not to determine to do this or to determine to do that. What one must do because one is oneself. So this Ibsen wrote in 1870, expressing not only his need for self-knowledge and honesty, but also the necessity of doing the inevitable if one is to live in the spiritual independence. Now, this makes us question that what is this self of which Ibsen speaks? I mean, he himself hints the answer when he writes to his confidant and friend George Brands, and he says that what I chiefly desire for you is genuine, full-blooded egoism, which shall force you for a time to regard what concerns yourself as the only thing of any consequence, and everything else as non-existent. So, here we see that Ibsen wishes a complete independence from every external norm that might sway the will. Consequently, the self of which he speaks is the will choosing with complete liberty and self command. And it is the will alone that matters. Again, Ibsen remarks that the great thing is to judge, is to hedge about what is one's own, to keep it free and clear from everything outside that has no connection with it. Action which proceeds from a conscious regard for custom, convention, social pressure, and law is untruth. This is what Ibsen believes, that when an action is in conscious conformity with these or with anything other than the purely willing will, it issues in illusion. And in either of these cases, the individual is not realizing himself in pure will act, but is acting with a basely intimated will. So, based on these letters, we can also say that for Ibsen, individualism cannot disregard the limitations set by a social condition. Ibsen fought a long struggle to remain above the society whose morality he despised. And I think when he wrote that, he who possessed liberty otherwise than as a thing to be striven for possesses it dead and soulless. And for the ideal of liberty has undoubtedly this characteristic, but it develops steadily during its assimilation. No, so that a man who stops in the midst of the struggle and says, "Now I have it," okay, actually thereby shows that he has lost it. Now, the reason for beginning with these letters and, actually sharing the snippets of his letter is not only to understand the concept of will and self realization from its perspective, but also to peek inside the mindset of the characters that he has created. As Ibsen writes in one of his letters to Ludwig Passarge, that everything that I have written has the closest possible connection with what I have lived through. Now, this is very, very important to understand the characterization of his character, how his characters has actually developed. He continues to say that even if the characters has not been my own personal experience, in every new poem or play, I have aimed at my own spiritual emancipation and purification, for a man shares the responsibility and the guilt of the society to which he belongs. Hence, once I wrote the following dedicatory lines in a copy of one of my books. Like, this is what Ibsen says, and this is the line. I'm just going to read it. He says that to live is to war with friends. To live is to war with friends, that infest the brain and the heart. To write is to summon oneself and play the judge's part. Now, these sayings, or these evolutions, these experiences have somehow closely knitted the mindset of his characters. The characters of Ibsen's plays, are actually a testament to the inner conflicts of his life. Life itself was a struggle for freedom and truth, and in writing of life, he could but offer up the bitter fruits of his own experience, because Ibsen was primarily interested in the inner conflicts and uh, changes which constitute the drama of the individual. The climax of the plays, I mean, if you read if you pick up any of them, you will find that they usually uh, uh, end up with a moment of realization, the moment in which his chief character, for one supreme moment, regardless of what is to follow, comes face to face with his own soul in complete accord and understanding. In fact, Ibsen's very first play, Catalan, written in 1850, is concerned to a great extent with the discrepancy between our desires and our power of giving them satisfaction. And the great similarity between Catalan, or Lady Anger of Ostrat, or the Vikings of Hegland, and the Pretenders, to add, lies in the contradiction between this will and desire, between capacity and ambition, the inability to reach as far as one can imagine oneself climbing to. Now, for example, in Rosenholm, it becomes Johannes Rosmer's inability to tear himself from the ties of the past, to reach as far as he is able in the work of ennobling and uplifting mankind. But in Hedda Gabler, it becomes a dominant note. And while researching more on Ibsen's work, I found a paper on one of his notebook, a recently discovered notebook of Ibsen, which furnishes with the following important clue of the character of Hedda Gabler. Because we all know that Hedda Gabler is one of the most frequently misunderstood, questioned, and different of Ibsen's characters, but one which becomes completely comprehensible if viewed in relation to his general philosophy. Ibsen writes that the play must be built around the inevitable, as we have already mentioned. What is this inevitable? What are these experiences that actually forces us to take this path? So the play must be built around the inevitable, the hankering after and aiming at something that stands against all conventions, uh, established customs in one's consciousness, and also Hedda's nature. Like there lies deep portrait of at the bottom of Hedda's nature. It's also like a deep poetry that flows in her nature. She wants to lead a man's life, but then comes hesitations, the inherited deep-rooted beliefs. One marries spaceman, but one occupies one's imagination with lover. Think of the situation. I mean, we also find characters like this in this contemporary time as well. Maybe we have made these characters, and one leans back in one's chair, closes one's eyes, and pictures his adventures. And but she, Hedda, cannot do it herself, cannot take part in the other one's goal, and so she shoots herself. Now, what is this inevitable that Hedda craves to the point of giving her life to realize what has always been in question? I mean, it is not the search that for that which will give significance to an existence that has no meaning or no purpose. This inevitable can mean only some experience, some contact that will fulfill Hida's existence and thus realize her fullest possibilities. And when she finds out that this life has nothing to offer, this whole life, her existence has nothing to offer her that will lift her existence above the, it has become prosaic and ugly. She chooses to be, for at least one brief moment, the master of her own destiny and ends it all in a suicide. Similarly, like if you move on to another play of Ibsen, a very celebrated one, A Doll's House, we again find that Ibsen attacks a society which countenances a relationship in which the husband is permitted to dominate the immature wife, a society which will allow a woman to reach adulthood without educating her to a realization of her own potentialities and capacities. No, but if you look at the characterization, the character portrayal of Nora in A Doll's House, you will find that, Nora was one of those individuals to whom Ibsen gave the potentialities for this development. I mean, he placed her in a position which brought out her latent qualities, which gave her the vision and insight to realize wherein she had hitherto failed. And with this realization, Nora becomes one of those fortunate individuals uh, destined to widen the boundaries of human experience. Ibsen once said that man is right who has allied himself most closely with the nature. And indeed, today, Nora's importance no longer rests on her then courageous exist from the Helmer's household, but on the deeper significance underlying this act, her awakening individuality, her courageous acceptance of herself as she then was, and her spiritualized imaginations, which reached ahead so surely as she saw herself as she might become. I mean, this is something very important that we need to understand when we are trying to assess our own self, when we are in the middle of crisis. This understanding of our own mind, this understanding of our own capabilities is very important. And the character of Nora uh, somehow stands by, this spiritual imagination or the courageous acceptance of herself. Again, in what is probably Ibsen's most autobiographical play, The Master Builder, we are confronted with the problem of the individual's will to achieve the most transcending experience that life has to offer. As it glorious, in its glorious climax, we find that Hilda's unmistakable triumphant cry rises above the screams of horror. When once again she sees the master builder as she has hoped and dreamed of his being, he has done the impossible. And for one brief moment stands above and beyond all that has heretofore kept him from living with courage and freedom. I mean, it is a brief but transcending victory for them both, and Soul's death cannot be considered except as a minor tragedy, for there is music, harps in the air, as Soulness stands above the old fears and faces his God, and uh, his end, like Heda's, like Rebecca's, is but a culmination of the supreme moment of his life. uh, I think the same principle applies to Ibsen's other dramas as well. I mean, with the inevitability of the Greek tragedy, Ibsen's plays follow a clearly defined path. I mean, his characters, being intensely human, lack the perfection which would bring them unscathed, but they rise above and beyond the mundane consideration of society, paying a ultimate price for their individuality. James Hunker reports that Ibsen once said that many things and much upon which my later work has turned, the contradiction between endowment and desire, between capacity and will, at once the entire tragedy and comedy of mankind, may there be dimly discerned. Somehow, I think, Ibsen knew then that the pioneering spirits who struggle to surpass the limitations of their own existence must perish in their attempts to go beyond the accepted boundaries, but go ahead. They must, regardless of the outcome. He who struggles one step past his fellow creatures, though he perish in making his single step, has lived, has not lived in vain. And I want to conclude here because I understand, because you also have a time frame. So I want to conclude with what Ferdinand Rutten has declared, that there can be no tragedy without a struggle. There can be no tragedy without a struggle, nor there can be genuine emotion for spectator unless something other than greater than life is at stake. And this is the ethical teaching of Ibsen's greatest dramas, his characters, their will and self-realization, that if something other and greater than life is at stake, then the attainment of this thing, through the price of attainment, be a sacrifice of life itself, is a victory rather than a defeat, a triumph rather than a tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarkar. It was great listening to you. Now, participants, we are expecting questions from you. If you have any question to Dr. Sarkar, you may ask. You may raise your hand, or you may write them in the chat box. Any questions?
I think I would like to ask one thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, that is, I just didn't understand that part when you were saying that man is part of nature. Is it said by Ibsen? I mean, only man? I mean, he ignored women?
No, I think it has been said in a very general context. I mean, because when you read Ibsen's play, you will find that most he has given so much of focus to the female characters. I think just a normal search will say that he is the male feminist. So it's not about man as the gender biased man, but in general, because Ibsen once said that. Find out who you are and become the person, because to realize yourself is to the highest goal a person can attain. And this self realization, I think, was Ibsen's greatest objective. So I don't think that it is actually dedicated to one gender, but I think this self realization, the concept as a whole, and the way we have divided or understood self in various ways, whether through the lens of the myth, whether through the lens of the nature, whether through the lens of the various critical attributes of life. uh, I think this has actually developed and has defined us to become a person that we are, understanding our own capabilities, rather than just talking about one particular character. Now, see, if you see Hedda Gabler's character, or if you see Nora's character, you'll find how strongly they have been portrayed. I mean, even today we have all those issues in our society. I mean, whatever she has gone through, the suicide that she committed, they actually mirrors what is actually happening in the society. But in spite of with the patriarchal doctrine that we keep focusing on, that she has no control and tries to make everything unhappy, felt that she has the power to do what she can do with her life. So I think that this is not only targeted to man, but humanity in general. Unmute yourself. You have muted yourself.
So I would like to ask you another question that, yeah, it's actually everyone ask, I think, this kind of question about Ibsen's drama, that all are female focused mainly, and female desire, and also you were talking about the power, the crisis between established tradition and self-will, and the consciousness that and also the ambition. So uh, when Ibsen was writing those dramas, it was at the end of 19th century, right? So
Around 1816, 17, yes.
yeah, so that time no one was thinking about women ambition. I mean, women were considered as like half human being even that time. So
Do you think that has changed now? Do you think that has changed now completely? Don't we find a similar kind of, somehow the imbalance is there? You cannot deny it. There is a kind of boundary. There is a kind of restriction. Even recently, I was listening to, the U.S. representative Alexandria Horacio's speech on, we all know this black and white. Photo posting thing in Instagram, dealing it with empowerment and all. And how she says that, the way women are treated, the words, the sexist comment that, have been posted on them is not something very new. I mean, talking somebody, disgusting, talking somebody, using, lurking, uh, what do you call I don't want to sound say it adjectives, but using these kind of words, it's not very new. But uh, people have started some people have adapted to it. They have felt that this is how it is, and some women have started voicing out. And uh, Ibsen has actually voiced out for all of them. I mean, all the characters. Look at the issues that he has raised. That marrying to somebody who doesn't know what adulthood means, who doesn't know. The words that her husband used for her is like, she's like a squirrel, she's like a small gift for her wife. So I mean, in general, you can call it very cute. At the same time, you can also raise a question and call it demeaning. I mean, you simply cannot uh, project a character. You simply cannot define a women's character to somebody who is very timid just because she is innocent. I mean, you need to have proper understanding of the words as well, which, you define. So I think Ibsen has actually done that, especially in that time when it was very difficult, when the society, when the writers, when there was a huge, demarcation between the writings of men and women. And you are also a poet, and I know that you know that how even the poetry anthologies, I mean, you will find that out of 100 poets, only 2 or 3 women poets used to get space in those anthologies, because again, women writing, because again, women's problem. So in that era, in with that mindset, what Ibsen has done uh, for the women, for their voice, it's I think it's commendable, and it's very deep. I mean, dealing with the issues of depression, dealing with the issues of psychological crisis, dealing with the issues of body, one's own life, understanding of the self, uh, the fears that we have, and just blurting them out that this is what I am is really, really very beautiful, very powerful, and actually that is very empowering.
thank you, Queen.
Participants, please write any question or comment if you have, or you may unmute yourself to ask the question or to add the remark directly. No questions from participants.
Actually, Queen has I mean, talked very clearly. She has not
I hope
given, I mean, she has not left any question to ask for the participants. So, Yeah, I think it was really a very good session, and you know, our students, I think some students, they might have already read of Ibsen's Doll's House, because Doll's House is widely you
Yes.
know, appreciated drama. So uh, and I think that uh, like no one even knows about Ibsen's other dramas that much, because everyone knows the doll's
Yes,
house,
you
and the
know.
doll is the omen, and metaphorically it has been presented
Yes,
like
yes,
this way.
yes.
So uh, don't you think that as you were as okay, our one of our students wrote that the concept is so clear.
The concept is clear,
Yeah.
so there is no question.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So I was just trying to ask you another thing, that the existential crisis, okay,
Mhm, mhm,
that is true for man and woman, and as it was a modern period when Ibsen started writing dramas.
mhm,
So, uh, but that existential, the theory of existentialism, it came, I think, later,
mhm.
not even that time. So, uh, just my question is that how do you define the consciousness, okay, consciousness of, or the self will of women uh, of that era, uh, even from a modern perspective, like they were not, the women, they were from elite class, okay, most of them, and they were not that much educated, although they are from elite class, but they were
Yes.
not that much educated, but they were so much self-conscious. Okay, so
Mhm.
do you think that somehow that, yeah, we are saying that men are dominating women, but men are dominating to, think of their own self-consciousness, or somehow they are boosting up them there.
Okay. What I understand is now when you said that the women were
No,
the part of this
just
elite
let me
class,
add
but
another
then
thing.
they were not educated the way
Hello, Queen, are you hearing me? Actually, listen. Hello.
Disconnected. I think we should wait.
Join করতে পারেন? Oh, okay. She's joining. Um, yeah. Okay.
Please unmute.
yeah, I think yes, there was a network glitch. I'm so sorry about that. Okay, so I think
No,
I don't know.
I
Yes,
would just add something like, nowadays even some people say, or there are some arguments that even
mm,
feminism is shaped by man. Actually, it's not the true feminism
Hmm.
shaped by females. Even what men are saying about our desire, our power, how to be empowered and how to be self-conscious, we are actually doing, or we are actually following their will. Okay, so don't
Okay.
you, I mean, my question is that in that time Ibsen even, I mean, sometimes I even find that that was not even Nora's will, that was not even, I mean, other characters' will. It was more like the will of Ibsen, a man's desire to see a woman like this way. Okay?
Okay. So, to begin with, like when you said that, the women here belong to a certain class, but, their education, the way they have projected themselves was, very different from what you perceive a women who is actually educated or, belongs to a certain class. Now, what happens is, uh, you know, uh, I, I want to ask you, I mean, who decides this, that, what is correct, what is wrong, what code of conduct we should follow and what we should not? Like recently, when, there was a debate related to this freedom of speech kind of a thing, we found voices from both the sections, where one section said that, this freedom of speech, this voice is very important. And most of us, have actually congratulated the judgment of the court. But what has resulted, it has increased the trolls, it has increased the memes, it has increased the objectification of women's body. I mean, if you also look at from this perspective, now we are also living in a society where, if it comes to me, then I'll raise a question, then I might show my anger. But if it goes to you, I would simply point out at you and say, there must be a problem in from your side, you must have done something wrong. So, in a society where we don't know exactly that how we, whether we are standing with each other, or the relationship is more likely to be on, my own benefit. I mean, if it benefits me, it probably be correct, I can be with you. If somehow I feel that, this is not good for me, even though you are correct, I won't stand by you. So, even in Ibsen's character, we actually find the conflict, as you said, that after all, it is the character of female is painted by this man. And yes, I would say that he must have his own biases, he must have his own ideas. But again, now, if you want to uh, what do you say, if you want to see it, I mean, keeping the other works that were coming out at that place, his contemporaries, the James Joyce and all, you will find that at least here the characters, we find a kind of a voice that were not very much present in the characters that have been portrayed in that era. So it's not only about beauty, it's not only about, long hairs or blonde hairs and all those things, but it also about understanding this spiritual emancipation and purification. Because, in all the Ibsen's plays, man shares the responsibility and the guilt of the society to which he belongs. I mean, whether, through his letters, or, uh, uh, towards the climax, whether it's the character, the man or the women, they are usually, there is a used moment of realization, and the moment in which the chief characters, whether it's Nora, whether it's any other character, at least for one supreme moment, regardless of what it is follow, regardless, the patriarchal society, regardless the mindset that was working at that time, regardless the portrayal of, the various characteristics, the code of conducts of various gender, comes face to face with his own soul, and complete accord and, understanding. So I think this is more important, that at least for a moment they actually come face to face with their real self. And this is, I think, how, this whole, the concept of capacity or ambition, as you say, the demarcation of, the inability or to reach as far as I can. I think actually this makes the path for all his characters.
Okay, we have a question from one of our participants. So Partha Pratim Sarkar, could you please unmute and ask your question? Partha Pratim Sarkar?
Yes, am I audible to you?
Yes, yes, Partha.
Uh, can we consider the situation of self-realization?
Mm-hmm.
Is it the example of abstract theater?
Uh, Not completely, because there is a non-existential part. There is also a part which says that there is nothing relevant. But in Ibsen's plays, we don't find that absurdity always. Rather, except the suicide part, we also find that he has always given base, a template to his characters, so that they can grow on them, so that they can reach out to their capabilities. So uh, finding that ground, I think finding that whole template of sensibility is very important. I mean, it's very easy to create a situation, especially when it comes to play, short novels, novellas. We find that creating a situation where a character would take a drastic step is not very difficult, but holding the characters from doing something extreme, and taking the character back and making him or her understand of his own power, of his own will, of the strength that the character have, I think is very important. And Ibsen, through his plays, actually have done that. I mean, uh, there are so many examples which says that how this template, this base has given strength to his character. I mean, to realize their fullest possibilities, that even in a situation where the character feels that life has nothing to offer, uh, uh, the whole existence is prosaic and ugly, at least we remember her for her potentialities and capacities, for realizing her own worth. And I think that vision and insight to realize wherein the character has failed, and the realization to accept it courageously, I think is something that Ibsen has focused more on.
Okay, as
So
there
thanks
are
a
no
lot.
more
Thank you
questions,
so much.
there are no more questions. So I think we have come at the end of the session. I would like to thank all the participants who joined today, and special thanks to our guest, Dr. Queen Sarkar. Dr. Queen Sarkar, thank you very much for giving us time. Uh, we enjoyed your talk thoroughly, and we hope we will get you next time in near
Sure,
future.
sure. The pleasure is mine, and I would love to see the students if they want to connect, if they want to, they have any queries. Those who couldn't join today, even after listening to this video, if they have any queries, I mean, I think Shafinur ma'am has my email ID. They can always be in touch. They can always connect, and I look forward to more interaction with all of them.
Okay, thank you so much. So we are ending this session here.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you. Thank you. Bye.